But I was also thinking about a kind of a maybe more literal or more obvious manifestation of spirituality in film when I was thinking about another very popular movie from this past year, and one that I liked very much, which was the Pixar film Coco, which is about spirits. It's about ghosts. It's about the presence of the afterlife, of the dead in the world of the living. It's about cultural tradition and family and the way that those are kept alive and grounded in the communication between the physical world and the metaphysical or the spiritual world. And how I don't know, have you seen this movie? Yeah. You like it? I mean, it's a beautiful movie. But it kind of suggests that the communication, the transactions between the living and the dead, between the ancestors and the current generation, exposes or reveals a dimension of experience that goes beyond the world of flesh and blood, goes beyond money and ambition, and yet also dwells in the ordinary cycles of life. And it's a very profound movie in that way. And it's one of a few interesting kind of ghost stories that came out in the past year. And it's interesting to contemplate why these movies should be coming out now, what kind of curiosity or hunger they might be satisfying. One of them is David Lowery's A Ghost Story. I don't know how many of you saw that, with Rooney Mara eats an entire pie in it. But the main thing that happens is that Casey Affleck is in the entire movie covered in a sheet, playing a ghost. And it's a ghost story, in a way, a conventional haunted house kind of ghost story, but from the ghost's point of view. And it explains why he's knocking the dishes off the shelves and why he's rattling the door and why all these spooky, scary things are happening. Because he's trying to communicate, he's trying to cross that boundary from the afterlife in which he finds himself into the world that he's left behind. The other interesting ghost story, just because I wouldn't want to leave you without recommendations of movies to go home and stream, is Personal Shopper from the French director Olivier Assayas, starring Kristen Stewart as a personal shopper, someone who goes around selecting fancy clothes for rich clients, but who is trying to communicate with her dead brother and trying to sort of to summon his presence using sound recording and photography. And it is it's an art film down to its bones, but it's also a ghost story. It's also a haunted house story. And I talk about ghost stories partly about Coco and these others, partly because they suggest to me what you could call a basic, fundamental spiritual dimension of movies, and maybe of film as a medium. And that's the capacity, the literal, material, physical ability of cinema, of movies, of the moving image, to summon up presences that are both real and unreal, to create events and bring to life people who are long gone or who never existed. And to make those exist both in a very real, palpable, physical, sensorily immediate way, and in a way that's entirely abstract. They're shadows, they're projections, they're images, they're phantoms, they're specters. And yet, we've all been to the movies and we all know that they're also very real, that they sometimes seem even more real than the reality, than the real people that we know. And this power of the image that we often take for granted or don't think about or don't let bother us or haunt us as it maybe should, is connected to some very old beliefs and maybe superstitions about photography, which is the ancestor of film, and which has an association in the 19th century with the supernatural, with death, with ghosts, with the uncanny, with a world that is somehow conjured into visibility, but that is not itself visible or real. And you know, photography, there are sort of legendary or apocryphal stories about the superstitions attached to photography. The idea that the camera has the power to steal or to capture the soul. The idea that certain chemical processes can reveal the presences of ghosts and specters. And even the notion before the existence of moving pictures that the objects and people depicted in photographs could in fact move or breathe or see. And there are also, of course, the legends about the early movies. The most famous story about the birth of movies, which I've never really believed is true, but is a beautiful story, is about when the Lumiere brothers showed one of the first films to be projected in a more or less theatrical setting, a cafe in Lyon. The film was the arrival of a train into the Ciotat station, and supposedly all of the members of the audience fled the cafe because they thought the train was gonna run them over. And whether or not that actually happened, because if you think about that for a minute, it's like, really? You know, they thought it was gonna come out of that sheet and run them over. And also, if you look at that film now, sort of you know, you can watch it on YouTube, and it's hard to really think, well, you know, that train is gonna come right out of my laptop and run me over. But that I think that kind of story is told in a way to remind us of the uncanniness and the power and just the strangeness, something that we take for granted now, even though it's been, you know, 125 or so years since the invention of moving images. The strangeness that these things would exist in our midst and all around us.